He's very good at tech support, we've discovered. So thank you, Heidi. All right, so for those of you who don't know, I'm Carly. I'm the business manager with Animal Therapeutics Online. I think if she's still there, we've actually got Jo, who's the owner and founder of Animal Therapeutics Online there somewhere. I've hilariously got the power to mute her today, so I'll leave her muted just so that we can keep things rolling. So for those who don't know, Animal Therapeutics was developed back in 2008, and since then we've grown into the sole supplier of the Activo-Med range across Australia and New Zealand. The Activo-Med range is manufactured in Germany. There's a couple of ranges of equipment, so the Activo-Med pulsed magnetic and massage rugs, which are quite popular and well known, and all of the additional equipment that goes along with those, so the leg wraps and girths. And then we also have the what we call the high performance range, which is the water treadmills, dry treadmills, vibrating floors, solariums, spas, all of the kind of equipment range. The reason that we support these products is that we've got a really high driver to support high performance across all of the ranges of equestrian disciplines. And yeah, most of the things that we do, whether it's education, products, supporting riders, supporting trainers, puts us in that direction to support high performance. Welcome back, Drew, who's just missed our spiel about high performance. One of our newest ambassadors there, Drew Carson over in New Zealand, so welcome. So a little bit about today. I think we've got most people. I don't want to kick Heidi off until everyone's here. But so a bit about how today will run. So we'll start off with Heidi Richardson, who's joining us from New Zealand. Hopefully you've all received the fact that you're here tells me that you've received all of the information. So Heidi manages the Southern Hemisphere range of SpectraVET therapeutic lasers. She has quite an incredible background in medical imaging, and she has been a radiographer for over 20 years. She's also trained in equine thermal imaging with Dr. Donna Harper in the US. And as you'll hear shortly, Heidi has a wealth of knowledge across all things therapy. So Heidi will be doing around 40 to 45 minutes. We'll then have a little break for some questions. You're welcome to either wait for that question point, or if you're thinking of things as they come through, feel free to just pop them in the chat window, and I can interrupt and ask if it's sort of relevant and possible. If we miss anything, don't worry, we'll come back to you afterwards, and we'll make all of the answers known later on. So after Heidi and some questions, we'll have a short interval, so it will have been about an hour, so you can run and grab a coffee. We'll then introduce Rebecca Williams-O'Brien. So Rebecca is an Aussie rider who has headed over to Germany with her horse, Hollingrove Dazzler. I can see Rebecca there, and she's literally just gotten off her horse. So we were just joking, this will be a very authentic question and answer. So Rebecca will be dialing in from Stefan Wolff's stable in Hagen. We'll run through some questions with her as well about her experience. And very much I encourage you, if you've got some questions for Beck, pop them in the chat window. Following that, we'll have a quick Q&A. You'll be most welcome to talk to us about our products, any of Heidi's SpectraVET products, or anything that you've got for Beck. We do also have some SpectraVET and Activo-Med sort of tag team package deals going that you would have seen on the email. And we also will be doing some specials on products for webinar attendees. So if you'd like any information about any of that, just let me know. But to kick us off, I might welcome Heidi. And yeah, Heidi, I'll pass the baton over to you.
Okay, so you need to, I'm going to share my screen and hope that this kind of works. Let's see. Cool. Now, can you guys see my screen that I've shared? Yeah, that's cool. You might have to, it keeps flicking and saying that my broadband width is low or something. So if I drop out, somebody might have to send me a message while I'm waffling on about something and nobody's actually listening.
We'll put some cold music on if that happens.
Yeah, it should be okay. But so thanks, Carly, so much for inviting me to do this. And I'm really passionate about education and getting the right information out there. There's a lot of misinformation on the internet and a lot of misinformation about magnetic therapy and pulse electromagnetic therapy. And I'm trying to clean up a few sort of ideas and everything. And I'm really into the research of it and what the research sort of shows, and I'm a bit of a science geek at that. So so I'm going to try and just run you guys through a bit of this, and hopefully it won't be too confusing, but as Carly said, you're more than welcome to email me with questions. It's a really quick overview on ultrasound, laser therapy and shockwave. And then we get into pulse electromagnetic field, and I can go really in depth into this as well, but I'm just going to try and keep this really kind of light and lighthearted, and so we can kind of get our heads around it. So let's make a start. I sort of did an altered version of this talk at a conference, and it was really well received. So I hope you guys all enjoy it. So I'm going to start off with laser therapy. So this is kind of my sort of obsession or passion, whichever way you want to go about it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this, and I can talk all day on laser therapy. I run 8-hour study days on this, so I'll try and not ramble too much and just give you the most information. So laser phototherapy, so it utilizes non-ionizing forms of light sources to elicit photophysical and photochemical events at various biological stages. So the energy can be produced by either a broadband light, a UV light, LEDs, which are light emitting diodes, or by lasers. So most forms of light will have an interaction with tissue, and then it just depends what type of interaction that is and how deep it can penetrate. So this is the electromagnetic spectrum, and I love this. This is my thing, because I studied for 4 years in a degree in X-rays, which is here, and I know about gamma rays, and then of course we've got UV rays, and then right next to UV rays is this little sliver here called the visible spectrum. Now the visible spectrum is as it sounds, it's visible. So if you can see the light, if you see a blue light or a green light, then it is immediately in the visible spectrum. And you will probably, some of you notice that there is red light therapy. So the red light therapy is in the visible spectrum because it's visible. Now on the other side of the visible spectrum, we've got this little thing here called IR, which is infrared. Now infrared, you can't actually see it. It's not perceived very much by the human eye. It is weakly perceived as a faint red, but not as much as the visible spectrum. And then of course, if we keep going that way, we've got microwaves, radio waves, and long radio waves. But what we're most interested in is the visible spectrum and the IR, which is the infrared spectrum. Now to give you a little bit more information about this, the visible and infrared spectrums are measured in wavelength. So a wavelength is the length of the wave. So if you've got a really short wavelength, like the blue light, which is only 400 nanometers, then it can't really penetrate that deep, because the little short wavelengths get eaten up in tissue really quickly, and they can't actually get absorbed much deeper. If you've got a longer wavelength, then it can actually penetrate much deeper into the tissue. So the blue light, which is 400 nanometers, is really good for antibacterial. So anything on top of the skin, anything sort of antibacterial, because remember it's a short wavelength, so it can't penetrate very deep. Then we get into the yellow light, which can go a bit deeper, and then the red light, which is really common, is about that 600 to 700 nanometers, and that can go about 1.5 centimeters. So in the human world, we use that for acne and burns and wounds and post-operative incisions, so it can go a bit deeper. Then if we get into the infrared spectrum, that starts off at 700 nanometers and it goes all the way up to 1200 nanometers. So we're getting a longer wavelength. Now that longer wavelength can penetrate a bit deeper into the tissue and up to 4.5 to 5 centimeters into the tissue. So once we've talked about wavelength, the next thing you need to consider is the power. So the power is how strong that wavelength is. So if you've got a strong power, then you can get to that wavelength's depth really, really fast, really quickly. If you've got a very low power, then it takes much longer time to be able to penetrate to that wavelength's depth. The next thing that needs to be taken into consideration is the light source. So the light source is up here and it's what's creating that light energy. And there can be a couple of different things for the light source. So we can have LEDs, which are light emitting diodes, and we can have lasers, and they can also give us our light source. And then the difference in the light source is the efficiency of the laser energy or the light energy that's going into the tissue. But really, when you're looking at the electromagnetic spectrum, we're really looking at the wavelength. And a general rule of thumb, there is a couple of little exceptions, but the general rule of thumb is the longer the wavelength, the deeper it can penetrate. So I'm going to look at laser light. Now, laser light has 3 different properties that differentiate it from normal ordinary light. The first one is monochromaticity. So this is one single wavelength. So on this electromagnetic spectrum, we're just picking one wavelength. It can be visible or it can be infrared, but monochromaticity is one wavelength. The next thing is coherency. So ordinary light is non-coherent, whereas laser light is coherent. So all the photons in that light wave are all in step with each other. And when we combine those two things, we get directional, so we can actually direct it. I'm going to talk a little bit about coherency because it's really important. When we have a non-coherent photon wave, it's all very disorganized. So all of the photons in the light source are very disorganized. And that disorganization means that they can't really penetrate very deep. Now, when we have a coherent photon wave, as this bottom image here, all of the photons are all in step with each other. So they're all actually moving and they're all in step. And this organization means that they can actually penetrate into the tissue much, much, much deeper. So I won't go too much into it. It does get a little bit scientific from there. But it is the difference between a non-coherent and a coherent light source. So when we talk about lasers or LEDs, you must remember that it's the wavelength. It's actually the wavelength that determines how deep. You can have a really short wavelength and it still cannot, doesn't matter if it is produced by an LED or by a laser, it will not be able to penetrate any deeper than that wavelength set penetration depth. So if you have a 600 nanometer, it doesn't matter if it's a laser or an LED, it will not be able to penetrate any deeper than 1.5 centimeters because that's what it's, the depth that it can get to. So let's look at these different light sources. So we've got lasers, which are monochromatic and coherent. Remember, coherent means that they're all in step with each other. The beam is produced by a power supply, a lasing medium, and a resonator, and we call it stimulated emission. So there's 2 mirrors like this, and there's a lasing medium in the middle, and they put in a power supply, and it bounces the photons back and forth until there's enough that it actually comes out. That's called stimulated emission. Like on the other side, we've got LEDs. So they're generally in the visible spectrum. They are neither coherent nor monochromatic, and they're produced by a semiconductor lamp, and the resulting light is spontaneous. So the current goes in, and the light comes out spontaneous. Now, LEDs, because the light is spontaneous, they're non-coherent. So they're a disorganized light source, okay? And it doesn't matter which wavelength the LED is, it still is a disorganized light source. This is just a little picture of some of our lasers. So the company that I work for, we produce, we manufacture all classes of lasers and LEDs as well. But this is just a little profiling picture of our lasers. So the yellow area is the effective primary laser beam, and the red area is like a domino effect down into the tissue. You can see, like with this one here, we do have a penetration depth of nearly 4 centimeters. We've got a wavelength of 810 nanometers, so a fairly long wavelength, and a power of 500 milliwatts, so a fairly high power. So we're optimizing it to get the best depth that we can, and we're down to about 4 centimeters. And these are a few of our different laser units that we have. And we also have the profiling for the LEDs. The yellow bit only goes down to about 0.5 centimeter, and the red hue goes down to about 1.5 centimeters. Because it's LEDs are non-coherent, so it's a slightly disorganized light source. So what does it do? What does laser therapy do? Well, the first thing, the primary thing that actually happens is the absorption of photons by photoreceptive molecules, and then we get this transduction of energy to induce chemical changes. I'll break it down a little bit simpler. We put the light energy in, these photoreceptive molecules take on the light energy, and when it gets to a certain level, it triggers a photochemical reaction in the cells. And what happens after that is we get a modulation of ATP, nitric oxide release, the formation of reactive oxygen species. That rolls into gene transcription, intercellular signaling, and then the fourth thing that happens is vasodilation. So we do get increased circulation, but it's a photochemical reaction in the cells to trigger them and make them multiply and divide, and to heal the area is actually where the laser works on the level that the laser works the best. And what can it do? Promotes fibroblast proliferation, increases tensile strength, relieves pain, increases angiogenesis, alignment of collagen fibers, modulating an immune response. And there's actually a lot of research that's gone into laser therapy, right down to the subcellular level, and which molecules are photoreceptive as well. So there's quite a lot of background to all of this. And a cute little picture here, we're putting in red or near infrared light into the mitochondria, gene transcription, cellular proliferation, extracellular matrix deposition, and growth factors. So, as I said, I can go much more detailed into this, but let's just keep it simple that the light energy goes into the cells and triggers a photochemical reaction in the cells. For any type of device, there has to be a classification system, and this is a classification of hazard, be it hazard to the eye or to the skin. So class 1 is very low powered, absolutely no chance of any damage. Class 2 is a visible low powered, and it's still pretty safe. The class 3R is safe when handled carefully. Class 3B, which is a majority of the lasers on the market these days, is a class 3B, is hazardous when the naked eye is exposed, and so we have to wear eye protection. And then class 4 is hazardous to the eye and the skin. So the big high-powered class 4 lasers, they do have a lot more chance of damage that they can produce with that. All classes of laser will have a biomodulation effect in the tissue, and the class 4 lasers have the greatest risk of damage to the eyes and the skin. And more power does not necessarily mean deeper penetration, because it is the wavelength. Remember, it's the wavelength that determines how deep it can penetrate to, and then the power, that is how fast that wavelength gets to that depth. And there's also physical application design and technique as well. I mean, you could have a really good laser, but if you're like waving it around or, you know, pointing it up in the air, well, it's not really going to do much use, is it? So we do have, there's no actual contraindications, but we do have precautions for laser therapy, obviously around the eye. Cancer and tumours, not contraindicated, but there does need to be caution, and there needs to be more studies done. Around the thyroid, you don't want to overstimulate the thyroid on a human or a horse. And growth plates, prolonged use, like I'm talking over months, like 3 to 4 months on growth plates of growing horses may cause a problem, but it's more of a precaution than a contraindication. So if anybody has questions on laser therapy, please, I'm more than happy to be emailed or WhatsApped or Facebooked or whatever, because this is just really scratching on the surface of it, really. But let's carry on. Let's go to ultrasound therapy. So ultrasound therapy uses sound waves that are at a frequency above the range that are inaudible to the human ear and termed ultrasonic. So generally, in medicine, they were using ultrasound as a diagnostic tool, and then they realized that it was actually having an effect in tissue. So they started investigating how that was happening, and the difference is just the equipment. So ultrasound converts electrical energy to kinetic energy in the form of sound waves. The sound waves are created by a vibration of crystals and a transducer, and you need to have gel on the horse to be able to reduce the friction and get that ultrasonic wave absorbed into the tissue. The depth for ultrasound is about 2 to 5 centimeters, so it does, you know, it does actually go pretty deep into the tissue. This is an ultrasound wave, so it's one cycle of compression and rarefication, and the particle density is greatest during compression. And as you can see by this ultrasound wave, it's a very uniform wave, very similar to a laser photon wave. But the ultrasound, this wavelength is very set, and so is the amplitude as well. So it's a very uniform biphasic wave here. So how does it work? Well, sound wave goes in and creates kinetic energy, which gets converted to thermal energy. So heat increases metabolic activity in cells, causing an increase in oxygen, which in turn has an effect on vasodilation. There's also membrane diffusion and exonic activity. And there's another little thing called cavitation, which actually happens in ultrasound as well. So it's a little effect, but it's still there. Benefits: it may stimulate collagen. It's really good on white tissue, so tendons and ligaments and stuff like that. It can accelerate the proliferation phase of healing, increase joint mobility, and relax muscle spasms and reduce edema. Ultrasound's really fallen out of favor, and it's this massive list of contraindications. Never to be used around the eyes. Pregnancy because of the cavitation on the amniotic fluid. The heart should not be directly treated. Growth plates, it will disrupt normal growth in the epiphyseal plates. It will delay in healing fractures over the fracture site due to the delay in calcifications, never overinflamed blood vessels, tumors, cellulitis, or infection. So unfortunately, the window of what you can use ultrasound on is very small, and the contraindications are very large. It still does definitely have a purpose in therapy, but it's possibly falling out of favor a little bit. And then it got reinvented really about 15 to 20 years ago. It got reinvented into extracorporeal shockwave. So, and a lot of you guys have probably heard about shockwave, but you don't really know what it is or how it works. Maybe a bad experience, maybe a good experience. So, you know, so look, researching this a little bit more, try and get to right down into the level of what exactly the shockwave is doing. So it's somewhat like ultrasound, but there's a wavelet. Remember, the ultrasound wave was very uniformed like this. Well, a shockwave has this wavelet of a very high pressure, fast moving, followed by a low to slow negative pressure, which makes like a deformed wave. And then they increase the amplitude of that, and it becomes a shock wave. So it's very well named because it really is a shock wave. Ultrasound is biphasic with a peak of 0.5 bar, whereas shockwave is uniphasic and it has a peak of 500 bar. So it is very much amplified sort of ultrasound, really. So here's a cool little picture here. So here you can see you've got this high, fast pressure followed by a low to negative and no pressure. So the pressure wave travels through fluid and soft tissue, and the effect occurs at the change in impedance, such as bone to soft tissue. So shockwave is really good on those areas where you've gone from muscle to bone or ligament to bone, or those attachments into bone, or anything that's sitting kind of on the top of bone. It's at that change in impedance where the shockwave actually has its most benefit. It can be generated by 3 different forms: electrohydraulic, electromagnetic, and piezoelectric. The piezoelectric involves crystals which are mounted in a sphere like this, and then they receive a rapid discharge, and that induces a pressure pulse in surrounding water, which steepens it to a shock wave. And the arrangement of the crystals are like this, so it sort of gets focused. So anything with shock wave, it actually has to be focused to a point, and then the intensity at that point is where the shock wave actually is, and then you actually have to try and aim that point of the shock wave right on the part that you're actually wanting to use the shock wave on. So what are the effects? So the direct effect include membrane hypopolarization and the formation of free radicals, an increase in stimulating factors like growth factor, mitigant activated protein kinase, and then the indirect effect is due to cavitation. So shockwaves generate high stresses that act on boundary interfaces, and they generate tensile forces that cause cavitation. Cavitation is tiny, tiny, tiny microscopic bubbles that form in the tissue, and they get bigger, gas bubbles, and they get bigger and bigger. And then when they pop, it shoots out like a jet stream. And it's that shooting out of the jet stream that has an effect on whatever we're aiming the shockwave at, if that kind of makes sense. So it needs to be most effective on the bone and ligament injuries, breaking down of scar tissue and re-stimulating bone growth. It's very, very effective in non-union fractures because it can break down the calcifications that are not bridging and then re-stimulate more bone healing. Osteoarthritis, neovascularization, effect in tendon and ligaments, and very successful in high suspensory desmitis. So where the suspensory ligament attaches into the bone and you get this irritation and desmitis here, especially in dressage horses, and you just they can't seem to settle that irritation down. Shockwave's really good because it's that change ligament to bone impedance, and it works away at settling down that, that inflammation around that area. So remember, shockwave was originally used in human world as lithotripsy. And lithotripsy was to break down tiny calcifications in the kidneys. So anything that has a calcification in it, bony or calcifications in the muscle, shockwave's really, really good to use on those types of area because it actually breaks down the calcifications because it is a shockwave. We do have some contraindications: epiphyseal plate within the shockwave, coagulopathy, acute infection, alveolar tissue, which is lung tissue, brain, pregnancy, and tumor as well. So there are some contraindications. And it does need to be performed.
Oh, sorry. Heidi, I just had a quick question from the crowd here for you.
Yep.
Hopefully it fits in with what you're talking about. So Joe asked, does shockwave have to be performed by a vet? And how many treatments are typical to break down scar tissue and to help heal a chronic soft tissue injury?
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be veterinarian, but I would strongly advise it performed by a veterinarian just because they know anatomy a lot more. There are some units coming out of China that some lay people are buying, but I would advise the veterinarians know what they're doing with it. When shockwave first came about, like 10, 15 years ago, they were shockwaving everything. Like, I mean, knees, tendons, wounds, they were shockwaving everything. Now they've really narrowed the field of what it is clinically indicated for. And this makes me very, very happy because they're really getting down to exactly what it works on. And the good thing about shockwave that perhaps I like a little bit more over laser therapy, oh, you didn't hear me say that, but is that you can do 1 or 2 treatments, and that is all that is required. They do 1 treatment, see how the horse responds to it, and then possibly a second one. It's very unheard of doing 3 treatments. And the effects of the shockwave can actually last, you know, quite a long time. And and especially if it's breaking down calcifications or scar tissue, it doesn't actually come back. And you can actually follow up the shockwave with laser therapy and with pulsed electromagnetic field as well. So it's a really good thing to have 1 or 2 treatments on, and then you must follow it up with massage or, you know, magnetic therapy or laser therapy as well to help it resolve. The other thing is there's the number of shocks and the energy density can greatly change the outcome. So this is why veterinarians really do need to be trained in it, and they do need to know what they're doing. Non-union fractures for dogs, it needs to be angled along the plane of the fracture for it to be successful. I've had a lot of I've heard a lot of success in high ring bone in horses. I haven't had much success lasering them, but definitely with the shockwave, there's been a lot of success for that arthritic-y stuff. So really, shockwave really needs to be on chronic injuries or chronic conditions that are not healing, or arthritis, kissing spine. There's been some really good research for kissing spine, and I would definitely be looking at shockwave for kissing spine. But on acute injuries, it's possibly not really the best therapy to be using on acute injuries, and I would be reaching for pulse electromagnetic field or laser first for acute injuries.
Heidi, another couple of quick questions. Liz asks, which I think you may have just answered. Can Shockwave be useful for arthritis?
Yeah, the joint really needs to be x-rayed first to see what's going on in there. And if there are calcifications associated with arthritis in the joint, then it is indicated for that. I personally have not used it on arthritis, but there is some really good research out there, and especially in the human world, of tennis elbow, plantar fasciitis, which is all an aggravated bone injury. And it's in that change in impedance. So anything that's sort of just sitting on the bone, you know, it works really good when it's on soft tissue to bone. So it's, yeah, definitely. And, you know, 1 to 2 treatments, and even after the first treatment, they should be able to notice a difference. Cool. So let's go on to magnetic therapy, because this is what we're all here about. I'm going to just talk a little bit about magnetic therapy, just the general, and then we're going to go into pulse electromagnetic fields as well. So soft tissue is made up of billions and billions of cells, and each cell is surrounded by a membrane, and they call this membrane the semi-permeable membrane. Now, through this membrane, going in and out of the cell, passes types of ions along an ion channel. Now, cations flow into the cell and anions flow out of the cell, and it's essentially providing essential nutrients to the cell to sustain the cell and keep it at its optimum level. So along this flow of the semi-permeable membrane, it creates tiny currents, sort of like a really minute electrical current, as these ions go in and out. Now, through trauma and disease, the charge that drives the cell current may be reduced in its ability to sustain the flow, and it can cause reduced cell function and then even cell death. So if we place a magnetic field over top of these semi-permeable membranes, and there is a current going through this ion channel, we can actually have an effect with this magnetic field on the current that drives it, and either speed it up, push or pull it back, or slow it down. So that's essentially how, you know, I mean, that's a very basic, it's pretty basic really, but I can go more in detail, but essentially that's how a magnetic field works over top of tissue. It's all to do with the ion channel that produces that tiny minute current and being able to influence that little current. So this is a sodium ion channel, and they're mostly associated with nerve endings and causing action potential as well. So so in the bottom here, you've got the intracellular area. So that's inside the cell, and the extracellular area is outside the cell. Now the side outside the cell is more positively charged. So it has, you know, potassium, calcium, and sodium all on the outside, but they need to bring them to the inside. So by opening this ion channel and increasing the flow, it brings these nutrients in, making the inside of the cell more positively charged. So the waste products that are more negatively charged, they don't want to be in there. So they want to go out. So they rush out of the cell. So we're moving waste products out and we're moving good things into the cell. Does that kind of make sense? I hope that makes sense. But that's what we're doing by putting a magnetic field over it, is increasing the ion channel and the actual flow. And it's doing that with these tiny minute currents that flow is causing, and we're actually able to draw the positively charged into the middle of the cell, and the negative charge is actually going to the outside of the cell. And so what can this do? Well, it can improve blood flow to the tissue. It may help reduce pain, inflammation, stress on the tissue, improve energy, circulation, and nutrient uptake. It balances the immune system, and it can increase tissue repair and bone formation. So let's look at pulse electromagnetic fields in this lovely picture here. I actually use this picture in my, you know, talk that I do at conferences too. So I didn't just chuck that in there for this talk. I do actually use this picture. So a pulse electromagnetic field is passing an electric current through a number of copper coils, which creates a dynamic component. So there's a whole heap of copper coils that are round, and we put an electric current into it, and it creates this magnetic pulse magnetic field around the area, and it depends how many coils in that copper as to how strong, and the current that's actually put into those coils as to how strong the magnetic field is that it is creating in the area. So this dynamic field interact as they rise and fall. So remember, it's a pulsed magnetic field. So as it's pulsing on and off and on and off, you get this push and pull action on the ionic flow. So it aids both inward and outward movement of the ions through the membrane. So what this does is it restores the cell's optimum balance and it allows the body better to function. And the effects can last for many hours, and the follow-on effects can last days and weeks as well. Throughout all the research for pulsed electromagnetic field, the one thing that really jumps out with all the research that I looked at was the treatment for non-union bone fractures, failed joint fusion fractures, and pseudoarthrosis. And the success rate was 70 to 95%. Mind-blowing. That is such a huge success rate on all of the studies that were done for pulsed electromagnetic field and any one of these conditions. You know, 70 to 95% success rate being yielded in these studies is pretty amazing, really. And it definitely shows a clinical indication, being non-union bone fractures or bony things, or growing and bone growing and stuff like that. So it's one to kind of just put away, store that away into your noggin there for a bit. So, but significant progress has been made in identifying some of the pathways that pulsed electromagnetic field have an effect on. And when I started to, look a little bit more into this, one of the effects is the calcium ion. So remember, we've got sodium, calcium, and potassium that it can have an effect on in the ion channel. So what happens is the calcium ion comes into the cell and we get a release of intracellular Ca2. And what it does is it actually binds to modalium. And so we get this cal-modalium sort of thing because it's released from one and bound to the other one. And that relates to metabolism, decrease in inflammation, and vascular tone. The next thing is nitric oxide. So there's a production of nitric oxide from exposure to pulsed electromagnetic field, and it can influence the cells of the immune system, the nervous system, and making it important in maintaining homeostasis. So again, there's that maintaining, optimizing, restoring happening there. So osteoblasts, studies have showed that stimulating effects on osteoblasts in early stages of culture and the enhancement of cellular differentiation, but it didn't show an increase in numbers. So when we're talking about bone growth and bone healing, it's not increasing the numbers of bone that's growing to heal. What it's doing is making sure that the bone growth is stronger. So it's the enhancement of the cellular differentiation, not necessarily multiplying heaps and heaps of bone that's growing. So that kind of needs to be cleared up a little bit. Nobody probably minds about that, but anyhow, but I do. So, so growth factors, the next one is the release of growth factors which support tissue regeneration and tissue remodeling. So there's our remodeling of the tissue for healing up of injuries. There is actually a whole heap of other things, but I kind of just left it at that to start with. So we're getting back to this homeostasis, optimize, maintain, and restore. And that's really where the pulsed electromagnetic field has its greatest advantage, is being able to get those cells functioning at their optimum, at their best balance, which means that the body actually is able to function at its optimum, really. Sorry, it's a little sciencey, geeky thing here. A little table with which cells we're affecting, the pulsed electromagnetic effects on them, the mechanism, and then the exposure parameters. I don't need you guys to know too much about this, but it can affect the lymphocytes, where there's an absence of spontaneous proliferation, the neutrophils, which have an anti-inflammatory effect on it. We've got fibroblasts, where the collagen production through the calcification of the CAMP metabolism, and we've got some, exposure factors here: 50 hertz, 50 hertz. There's a couple that are more high-powered, 75 hertz, but most of them are around 50 hertz or 15 to 50 hertz. So again, it's just a little bit more sciencey stuff. So I'm sorry if I'm boring you with that. This is my life, is science, boring stuff that I find exciting. But anyhow, let's carry on.
We love you.
I know somebody's going to ask me a question. Carly's unmuted herself already.
Oh no, I think I was about to ask you a question, which by the looks of your slide, you're about to cover. So you keep going.
I know. sometimes people are too fast to get to me, and I'm like, it's coming, it's actually coming. So I know people are going to ask me about the low frequency pulse electromagnetic field versus a high frequency or a high intensity. So I am going to go through that, just so that there's a lot of confusion out there at the moment about this. So the low frequency pulse electromagnetic field, which is most people, it's not actually called low frequency, it's just pulse electromagnetic field. It's widely researched and published, and until recently it was the only form of pulse electromagnetic field. So it does get very confusing for people. I can totally understand that. The device produced a waveform of consistent bursts of asymmetrical rectangular biphasic waves repeating at 15 to 50 Hertz. All pulsed electromagnetic field devices produce a combination of a magnetic field and an electric field. I bet you didn't know that. So it's not just a magnetic field. There's actually a combination of, a magnetic and an electric field that is actually being generated. So low frequency pulsed electromagnetic field generates a strong magnetic field. So the magnetic field is massive, but a very weak electric field. And the biological effects stem from the delivery of the magnetic field, like what the magnetic field is doing with that ion channel and with the calcium, sodium, and potassium ions. Okay, so that's our low frequency PEMF. Oh, now I can't move my slide. It won't go. Oh, there you go. So our high intensity or high frequency, there's a little bit of confusion over exactly what it's called, but high intensity PEMF or targeted, some companies are calling it targeted PEMF, is produced by a waveform that has a high peak burst followed by a series of repetition, then a longer interval space. So kind of like the shockwave, the ultrasound was very uniformed, and then the shockwave has this high peak, and then a drop off. And kind of like that, the targeted high intensity one sort of has that high peak burst as well, but then by a repetition and then a space and then a repetition. But what this does is it produces a very weak magnetic field and a very high, large electric field. So remember, all magnetic fields have a component of magnet and electric. Low frequency has a small electric field and a high magnetic field. High intensity or high frequency has a large electric field and a small magnetic field. So the biological effects stem from the delivery of the electric field. So it's very common to get muscle twitching with this high pulse electromagnetic field, and you'll see the horse's muscles are actually, jumping and twitching, and it's because of the electric field, not the magnetic field, because the magnetic field can't do that, can't give you a muscle twitch. So the penetration is perceived to be deeper, although I actually cannot find any scientific research on the depth of penetration for a high intensity pulse electromagnetic field. And in fact, I've only found one article that compares the two, and there was actually no difference between the low pulse electromagnetic field and the high intensity. They both have a better outcome than the control. There's a couple of research articles on the high intensity, but it doesn't compare the two, and who knows, using a low frequency pulse electromagnetic field may have yielded the same results. So there is a lot of misinformation out there about that, and my only worry with these high intensity pulse electromagnetic fields is when you get this muscle twitching, you also get muscle fatigue. So if anybody is using them or knows people using them, I wouldn't really be using it the day before competition or the day of competition, because that muscle fatigue could cause quite a few problems. But as with all of these types of therapies, they really do have their own little niche thing that they work at, and it's not saying that we should choose one over the other. You can combine them. So they do have their own niche. I would like to see a little bit more research, since I'm so research driven. And it's funny because the companies with the high intensity, they actually, all of their research under their research topic are all on low frequency PEMF. So yeah, that's kind of a bit interesting, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions on that because I'm currently researching it at the moment for some vets and some clients. So we do have some contraindications. Pacemakers, don't really get that in horses. Insulin pumps, don't really get that either. Pregnancy is more of a precaution than a contraindication, and it's more for the high intensity, not for the low PEMF. It does seem to be completely safe for the low PEMF. I can't see the chats, Carly. You'll have to see the chat. I can't seem to.
Sure. We're just getting a couple of questions here. How much longer do you have to go, Heidi? We might cover them at the end, perhaps, or? Yeah,
no, we're just like, look, that's it. We're finished.
Oh, okay, beautiful. So thank you. That was I learned quite a lot there. That was fantastic. We definitely appreciate your nerdy science brain on this one.
Yeah.
So no, that is fantastic. Now we've got a couple of questions here. Just for everyone's reassurance, we are recording this. I say that very confidently. Let's hope that it all saves and gets where it needs to go. We are running into break time, so if anyone needs to just run off and have a break, grab some water, rest assured you won't miss any of these questions. So Marianne has asked, what types of therapy would you recommend for someone who doesn't have any therapist training?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question.
Sorry, these are questions without notice.
Yeah. So really ultrasound has gone out of favor and there's too many contraindications. So let's throw that one out. Shockwave really needs to be done by a veterinarian. So let's throw that one out. Laser therapy is pretty easy to use, and if you've got a class 2 or a class 3B laser, it's very safe and there's not much damage that you can do, but you still need to know a little bit about what you're doing and where you want to treat. The laser works amazing on acute injuries, so give it an acute injury to heal up a tendon, a joint, a fracture, a shin soreness, splints, anything like that. It works really, really good on acute injuries. But if you say to me, oh, just laser my whole horse, I'm kind of going to be like, yeah, nah, I'm not really going to do that. So unless there's an injury for me to laser, an area to laser, or a muscle group to laser, if you want something that really is just easy to do and put on the horse, then I do. And I'm not just saying this because Carly's staring at me, but I do suggest the pulsed electromagnetic rugs, because you don't need to. It's good to know the science behind it, but it's something that you can put on your horse and it can go for 20 minutes and then it stops. It's the lazy man's way of helping his horse. For me, it's great because it does. If there's nothing wrong with your horse, but you really want to keep it in tip-top shape and maintain it, then the pulsed electromagnetic rug is brilliant. I can't laser a whole horse because, healthy tissue, the light energy just passes straight through it. So it's just going to waste my time. Whereas a pulsed electromagnetic field will actually help those cells and keep them at their optimum, and especially pre-work and after work. So for me, if you're not a therapist and you don't have heaps of injured horses and you're not wanting to sort of use it on an injury, which is where the laser is really good at, then I would go for pulsed electromagnetic, the rug or the pad. I really like the power pad at the moment, so I kind of like that one.
No, that's great. A couple more quick ones. Liz has asked there, can magnetic therapy be used on lymphoma?
Ooh, yes. Cancer is not contraindicated, so it can be used on lymphoma. Whether or not there would be much of an effect on it, and it certainly is not going to stimulate. People have this sort of thought that laser or magnetic therapy is going to stimulate the cancer to multiply and go throughout the body, and it's just not. It doesn't work like that. It's about maintaining those cells at their optimum so that the body can fight infections and fight anything that comes up. So I haven't seen any research where it's been a positive effect on lymphoma, but likewise, it's certainly not contraindicated for it. And it may help. It might not be the lymphoma, but it might actually help with the side effects of lymphoma, like edema, pain. You know, it might be able to help with pain relief and edema as well. So.
Oh, Lisa said, sorry, it should be lymphedema, which I don't know if that's different. But
yes, okay. So lymphoma is a form of cancer, and lymphedema is where you get massive amounts of swelling, and the lymphatic can't actually be able to drain that swelling away. And yeah, oh gee, I'm racking my brain. So lymphedema, I do think that it is a clinical indication for lymphedema. I'm trying to think about the human stuff that was done. And I do think because it increases circulation and it actually stimulates the lymph nodes, I do think there would be a positive effect on that. But maybe flick that through to me in email and I can do my little researchy thing on that.
Sure, no problem. Elle, who's over in New Zealand, has just said she uses her Activo-Med rug most days, but has a vet physio who comes with her high intensity PEMF machine for targeted areas that she feels needs it. From what you've just said, is she best off just continuing with the rug and not getting her for the specific targeted areas?
It depends what you're trying to achieve, because remember, the high intensity creates more of an electric current, which, you know, goes into the tissue. It is, the high intensity is indicated for pain relief, and it does seem to have quite a good effect on pain relief. But it really depends what you're wanting to achieve with it. I mean, and again, the depth of how deep it can go sort of varies. If you're just wanting to maintain the horse, well, then you just use the rug. Yeah, I mean, I probably need to know exactly what injuries the horse has. I mean, if it's a really deep-seated injury or something, or if it's scar tissue, I mean, Shockwave might be really indicated for scar tissue, and then follow it up with the rug. I mean, do you notice any muscle fatigue from the horse? I mean, there does seem to be a lot of muscle fatigue when they use the high intensity, especially if they're using it on a number of areas around the horse. There's a lot of the high muscle fatigue after it. But look, if it is working for you, and you're using the rug and you're using the high intensity PEMF, and it is working for you, then, you know, maybe carry on. It all comes down to money, really, how much it costs, I guess.
Perfect. I think I've missed one earlier. Someone's just reminded me here. Heidi, could you give an example of a high PEMF versus a low PEMF?
As in like a machine or a...
Melissa, Melissa Longhurst has asked this question. Perhaps, Melissa, if you want to just pop in and clarify if you mean equipment.
Like like the machine, or...
Oh yeah, she says yes, machine.
So there's about 4 of them over in America at the moment. I think one of them is called the Assessi Loop. That was one of the ones that I've been asked to review. There is the Equipulse. Ooh, I don't know if I'm saying the name right. There is an Equipulse. There is a MagnaWave, although the MagnaWave is actually kind of on the cusp of both, really. And then the low PEMF would be the Activo-Med, the I don't know, whoever else are your competitors. Most of the majority of them have been the low frequency, because that's all that there ever was, and all the research was pretty much done on that. And then it's only been recently, and I'm talking in the number of like the 3 or 4 or 5 years, that they've brought out the high intensity ones. So, and the Assessi Loop was definitely one that I've been reviewing recently. So.
Sure. Okay, and we might just make this the last question, because I'm conscious that we're up to next time. So Drew has asked, when would LED therapy, non-coherent, be beneficial over laser therapy, coherent?
Okay, so basically, if you're only wanting to do burns and wounds and superficial injuries that are 1.5 centimeters, then you can definitely go for an LED. They're very cheap to produce. You know, they're semiconductor lamps, so they're very cheap to produce. But if you're wanting to penetrate deeper into the tissue, then it has to be a laser. It really does have to be a laser. But you know, tiny dogs and cats, and anything superficial, like if there's a bang on the horse's knee, you can use an LED. Wounds, burns, anything that's, you know, 1.5 centimeters, depending on the wavelength of that LED, of course. 1.5 centimeters is about the penetration. So just have a look at how deep you want to go, and then, you know, and I mean, LEDs are really cheap. Like I'm talking like $500, $900, whereas lasers start off at about 4,000 or 5,000, and can go up 20 or 30,000 for a class 4 laser. So.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, Heidi. We are certainly very appreciative of your time. And yeah.
I hope I haven't confused anybody. I've tried to leave it fairly simplistic, you know, and I can certainly go a lot more in depth if anybody, you know, wants to email me about it.
Yeah, sure. So yes, following this, if anyone doesn't have any specific questions that they'd like Heidi to have a look at, feel free to email us. You should have my email based on when I've sent out the login details. So feel free. Liz, yes, I will be able to connect you up with Heidi. So that's all. Yeah. So thank you, Heidi.
Cool.
I'm going to try the very technical task of swapping you and.
I've just stopped sharing my screen, so you should be able to.
My face feels very big on my screen. That's okay.
Cool.
So hopefully everyone is still with us and still following. So I will take this opportunity to welcome Rebecca Williams O'Brien. So Rebecca, as I mentioned, is from Victoria in Australia. Just on 12 months ago, I think, Beck headed over to Germany with her beautiful horse, Hollingrove Dazzler, after she was invited to go and see Stefan Wolff. Hand over to Beck. Beck is joining literally from the States.
Literally just got off and literally just pulled his Activo-Med rug off. Just done his training, so this is hilarious timing. I do apologise if I cut in and out. There's obviously a lot going on here, so just give me a thumbs down if you can't hear me or anything like that. I am using my phone, so it can get a tad touchy. We're on Wi-Fi. We're actually on Wi-Fi here. There is no cellular service. We're in a black hole, so occasionally it decides to play funny buggers with us. So yeah, so welcome everyone. I was lucky enough to be asked to come train in Germany with Stefan Wolff in April last year, and we made the big move in August. Jazzy came over first with his big flight, and then I packed my bags and came too.
So Beck, I've got a few questions for you. I wondered if you could perhaps just start by telling us a little bit of background about yourself as a rider and how yourself and Dazzler got to be where you are, I guess.
How long's this thing? Basically, I'm 43 years old. I started riding when I was 3, so I've been doing this thing for 40 odd years. Some days better than others. But I actually, had the opportunity to find Daz, who, by the way, detests me being on my phone. So you occasionally get this, excuse me, what are you doing on your phone? Look. So I might move before his teeth come at me. I had the amazing opportunity to find Dazzy as a 4-week-old foal. Just a random email to Hollingrove stud, and they said, hey, we've got this little chestnut, would you like to see him? And he came into my life. I saw him the day after the Hanoverian tour went through, and they were lovely enough to award him Hanoverian champion foal for 2011 as a 4-week-old. So I knew he was pretty special from the get-go, you could say. sorry, I'm just moving away from the farrier sounds. And yeah, it's just one of those journeys. I had zero idea about young horses. I've always had horses that have been trained. I started dressage. I think I committed myself to dressage when I was 8 years old. So I've been doing it a while. Although safe to say I haven't been, as they say in Germany, I've been doing it the Australian way, not the German way. And we've had to rewrite a lot of our, or even my, ideas of how this dressage thing works. And yeah, it's been a really long journey. This horse has taught me so much. It's been amazing. Like, he's been the most amazing teacher, and sometimes it's been really, really tough. He's very opinionated. When I do it wrong, he's telling me I'm doing it wrong, even though he's quite young. He's only 9 years old now. And yeah, it's just been a really epic journey of really finding myself. I've got this very talented horse, and I really had to dig deep and find out who I am within that. And when I was given the opportunity to ride at the Carl Hester Masterclass in Victoria in, I can't even remember what year that was, 2016, I think. Yeah, it really opened my eyes that actually I can do this. I can ride this freak of a horse. He moves amazing, technically, sometimes not technically correct, but yeah, and it gave me the confidence to actually go, okay, well, what do I want? What do I want from our connection and our me riding? Because at times I thought, I can't do this. I've got to sell him. I just can't do this. It's too much. And then one day my husband said, guess what? You can't sell him. You've got to dig deep and figure it out. And from the Carl Hester masterclass, it really actually gave me that belief. And that's when I thought, if I was ever given the opportunity, would I head to Europe? Would I do that? And the reality is, within me, I said yes. And then this amazing opportunity last year came about. So a door opened and I've literally run through it with my horse. And yeah, here we are. Sorry, that was waffly.
Yeah, it's a really amazing story. And I mean, we've, for everyone at home, Beck had an Activo-Med rug for, I don't know, maybe 6 or so years.
Yeah,
so
about that.
Maybe that. So we've been able to watch Beck go through the levels and, you know, get to FEI and really get through some of the challenges with Dazzler. So it has been an exciting journey. Given that you are over there in Germany, could you give us a bit of insight into what your daily training routine looks like?
Yeah, so it's literally 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday. Obviously, if competitions were in amongst that, we would be adding those to the list, and depending on what day is a day off for him. So he literally goes out into the walker of a morning. So they basically clear the horses out, put them in the walker and clean the stables as they go through. So that's 20 minutes. Then I come along and about 10:30 in the morning, I put his Activo rugs on for a pre-warm-up training session. So that lasts about 25 minutes, I think that program does. And then I train for an hour, or depending on what day it is and what exercises we're working on. And then wash down, clean on my tack, and he now has his after training therapy session, only because we are working so hard. Like, we're working on the Grand Prix moves, all the high level FEI stuff, and he is working so hard, and I want to protect his body to no end. I do not want an injury at all. So And I'm big on that because I actually got started with the Activo-Med rug purely to help my Lusitano stallion. That was, we met, where did we meet, Carly? At Bonio Park, CDI.
Yes.
CDI in January, whatever year that was. And I just fell in love with the system, and I thought, yeah, this will really help him, because the flight and everything for him coming from Europe to Australia, it really mucked up his body, and we need to build a lot of muscle and all that type of stuff. And I just gained that belief. So that's where I had the belief. And then having the system here, which I'm so, so thankful, and then all this new training, the intensity of the training, like literally from your warm-up, it's an intensity and a discipline that I've never experienced. And it's from the start to the end. Your transitions have to be, you have to be aiming for a 10 for everything. And obviously there's a process to that where you have to allow the education process to take shape, but it is intense. And I know his body is just like, it's screaming out for help. And yeah, that's why I use it and everything. So, and it's gotten more like, I wasn't doing the after training therapy session. I thought, nah, just give him a rest and he'll be right type of thing, because he'll either, depending on the weather here, he'll either go out into the walk or the sand paddock of an afternoon for an hour, and that's it. Otherwise he's in the stable 24/7. And there was something not quite right, and not with him, just with what I was feeling, and I just needed to help him a bit more. So that's why I added the 2 sessions to him. So yeah, that's another very long-winded answer.
No, that's fantastic. So Joe has asked a question here, which you may have just touched on. What's the Australian way versus the German way? Can you give us some examples?
You really want me to do that? It is your half halting before every corner, after every corner, before and after every single transition. It is the intensity and discipline to know what you want and going for it every second of a training session. Now, yeah, between, you might have 15 minutes of high intensity and then do a walk breather, but you're still working on your walk. You're working on everything else. And yeah, I have, and even going to the competition. So the people I work with here, so I'm based at Sudenhof. You've got Ulf and Eva Muller and the Holstein Stallions. You've got Holger Finken and Saskia. So I'm surrounded by these amazing, amazing riders. And trust me, I was daunted. So a fish out of water, scared like you have no idea. And suddenly I'm training with these people and they're saying, yes, no, more intensity, do this. So I'm not only training with Stefan, I'm getting guidance from all these other people. And there is a difference. I even would say that there's more intensity in New South Wales than Victoria. I'd even go that far. I just think we don't want to aim high enough.
Yeah.
And these guys aren't going for 60s. They're going for 70s and 80s. You know, it all comes down to, you know, having that inside rib, understanding where the shoulder's got to be in every single move, and having them relaxed, hot and relaxed, moving from behind, all of it. And I have never trained like this, never in my life. And this is the place to find out if you can do it. You've got to come over here. And it's the same with the competitions. I was very lucky earlier in the year, well, unlucky that Dazzler actually got a cold and I had to scratch out of a competition, but I got to spend 3 days watching competition. So from the junior levels, like kids at 6, 8 years of age on these hot ponies going around, like they're getting everything out of these ponies, to, you know, the professional, the graceful Grand Prix riders. And like, it is full on every step of the way, and the training's no different. You don't go into a competition having not worked on the intensity that you have to get at a competition. It's just not heard of. So yeah, there you go. There's a lot to it. Like, I just think that, and there's also the atmosphere here. Like, they're going for massive goals, you know, to even make the Olympic team here is huge. Like, there are more Grand Prix riders in the area that I am in here than the whole of Australia. Or actually most, like, I'm like dead centre. They say that this is the hub for the Grand Prix riders. And to get on that team is just so hard. So hard. Because you have to be a high 70s scorer. So yeah, it really comes down to discipline and going for every transition. I don't think we do that in Australia.
Yeah, no, that sounds very full on. Now Heidi's just asked a question there. Do you ride any other horses while you're there, or
no, I don't. I could if I asked, but I also run an online business and other things, and I want to concentrate on Daz. I think if I bought another horse or something, if I had the money to buy another horse or anything like that, I obviously would. But no, I just ride Dazzles. Stefan would obviously give me the opportunity if I wanted it. But I just want to concentrate on our connection and what we're doing, really. But yeah.
Yeah, sounds good.
Sorry, there's a lot of flies.
It's okay.
It's summer here.
We're freezing here. I'm sure all the New Zealanders are probably in electric blankets or something. We've got a few people on the line who would be absolutely sitting by the snow. So Tina has asked, what do you do when you're not training? It's a great question.
Good question. I do apologise. My window's stuck. I run an online business dealing with human whole food nutrition. So that's awesome that I can still do that because it's all online and everything. And I can build that over here, which is great because it's worldwide. So I do that. I work out, I read books, and because of COVID, I watch Netflix. But I actually try and spend a bit of time watching the other riders, just gaining some knowledge, asking questions and all that type of stuff. But obviously being locked down for 3-4 months of whatever it's been, we've obviously had no ability to go any other, like I'm not allowed to leave the barn. I can only go to the supermarket or the apartment, but now everything's opened back up. Hopefully we can start comps and stuff, because I would love to get out and start testing everything that we've been doing. So yeah, it's Groundhog Day, literally 6 days a week, but I love it. Like, it suits my comfort zone, even though I don't like comfort zones. You know, the language is hard. I still haven't got that down anywhere near good. It's not, you know, it's hard being away from family and my husband and everything. But yeah, it is what it is. I keep myself busy, entertained.
I think Tina's just asked, did your husband move with you to Germany? It's probably, we're moving away from horses, but how's that going? How are you managing that?
FaceTime, Zooms, WhatsApp gets abused. Yeah, so he didn't move with me, but he is meant to come over every couple of months for like 10 days that we spend together, and we were literally just doing little trips around Europe and, you know, having an adventure on that side of things. But he still can't get over here. So, yeah, we've just been calling each other like a couple of times a day, just discussing our days and stuff. And look, I won't say it's easy. It's not. More tears than I care to admit to. But you know, you got to do what you got to do. And I love him dearly, and he's just looking after the farm back home. Can't wait till we get to do that. You know, get to see each other. Like he's like the first flight out of Australia that doesn't include quarantine, because I mean that's the hardest part. 14 days in a hotel doesn't suit either of us. So yeah, first flight out, he's totally here.
Yeah, amazing. We had a question, I don't know if it was mine or on the list there. Do they teach in English?
Yeah, so Stefan, everyone's pretty much speaks English here. Holger doesn't have a great repertoire of the English language. Sometimes I don't, but yeah, Stefan's great because he speaks beautiful English, so I can understand when he's yelling at me. And yeah, and anyone else, like obviously Ulf and Eva train all over the world, so and give clinics and stuff. So everyone actually speaks English, which is quite hard to also, especially in the barn, to practice the language because everyone speaks English. So there's no necessity for me to do it, and I've basically given up.
Okay, that makes sense. So thinking about the future, as much as you're sort of happy to speak about it, what are your goals with Dazzler? What are you aiming for? What can we look forward to?
So my future includes, so I've got another year here. I've convinced my husband this trip was only meant to be for 1 year, but because of COVID and everything, and because I haven't been able to compete, my beautiful husband is allowing me to stay here for another year, which is fantastic. And I want to get to Grand Prix, competing CDI, W even. I want to just try and punch it out, if that makes any sense. I've like been given this major opportunity, and if that can come off, then that's where I want to go. Hey, if I could get selected for the Australian team or something, you know, why the hell not? But that's not my goal. My goal, well, it would be a goal. It's like the furthest, the stretched version. But yeah, for right here, right now, I would love to get to Grand Prix, be competing it here, and be competitive here, which is a massive ask. But we're totally capable. We're putting in the training.
No, it's very exciting. And then just one other question. I mean, you know, obviously we have the Activo-Med systems which come from Germany. Do you see a lot of the systems around? What sort of therapies do people use in the stable? What do you see in that space?
Actually, basically everything gets used, because the sponsorship thing here, a lot of the top stables actually have quite a number of different equipment that they can use, and they basically get given. And so they've got an Activo-Med rug here that clients can use. That's through Holger. And they've got one of those, see, I don't know any of the names, like none of them. That new brown rug that's come out, that's another version of the rug, I think. It's a lot smaller. They use everything really. And the Pulse one, the one with the plastic loop.
Yeah, which is I think what I was talking about earlier. Yeah.
So they like using that. They've had good results on relaxing muscles and stuff with that. But I like the rug. I can throw it on Daz, and now that I've got the girth section as well, I just feel he's loosening up in the rib cage a lot better. And yeah, they use everything and anything, and they're paid to do so. So, yeah. But you've also got, you know, I think we've got like 30 horses here. So they pump them out really quickly in the morning. Like pretty much everyone's finished training. I think it's just after 12 here. And so, yeah, it's interesting. It's more like horses that have issues. get the treatments, otherwise sales horses and stuff that are getting moved through the barn quickly, it doesn't go that far. But yeah, they don't tend to use too many products.
Yeah. No, thank you. All right.
No problem.
Tina asks, do you have group lessons or are they private? Are you having one-on-one training?
One-on-one. It's all private training here. I've seen a couple of people having like group lessons with like 2 people, but they're generally friends, where Holger will do 2 people. But this barn is phenomenal with who comes walking through here for training. It's like, oh my Lord. It's really, it's absolutely phenomenal. But yeah, most lessons are very private, which is why I moved away from the indoor arena. Someone's having a lesson at the moment. So, you know, we do have to be careful when filming and everything that everyone's privacy is taken care of as well.
Yeah, wonderful. Liz has asked, do you train, question, do you train indoors or outdoors?
Both. When it's -5 degrees, you can guarantee I'm going to use the indoor. I must admit that the Germans don't like getting wet. They prefer the indoor, but I trained outside today, which is, I got drenched. I think I've just dried off. But yeah, it's, I actually prefer outdoors because it's the bigger arena. It's a full-sized arena. And the indoor is slightly smaller. And with the Holstein stallions, they're all a bit younger, like 3 to 6-year-olds. And, you know, you just want to give them a bit more space and everything. So I prefer outside, rain, hail or shine, true Aussie style. But yeah, I must admit, I've become a bit of a princess during the snow and everything. I only rode once in the snow. That was an experience and a half.
Liz says, do you miss the Aussie weather?
Actually, I must admit, Germany is not too much different. I would equate it to Melbourne in the fact that you literally have to layer up. It's actually very similar. I think it's just winter where you can have the snow and everything. It's a little bit more freezing. But they've got the clothing also so you can deal with it. Like the thermal fleece-lined jods, big jackets that you can ride in that are breathable and all those type of things. So, yeah, I don't miss it, no.
Yeah, that sounds good. And just a bit of a fangirl question. Apart from yourself, who's the most famous riding team since you've been there?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I didn't hear that.
I said, apart from yourself, who's the most famous rider you've seen since you've been over there?
It was pretty cool meeting Patrick Kettle and Linda Loatley at a competition. That was actually quite cool because another Australian rider, David McKinnon, was here, and we're at the same competition, and he was riding one of Mary Hannah's horses, and so he's like, we got to catch up, like this is our only opportunity. And so I got to meet them, I got to meet their little daughter, and it was just one of those like, yeah, oh my God, highlight. But then I'm also in a barn with Ulf and Eva Muller, and like it's just, and yeah, like I said, there's been a couple of moments where I've quickly Googled people's names from their tack boxes because I'm like, I don't know who anyone is, unless it's Isabel Worth, and then it's like, yeah, I know who you are. But I Google and I'm like, oh shit, that's that person. Oh God, okay. So there is like one of those moments during the day where you go, oh my God, I've just ridden with Isabel Freer or someone like that. And it's just like, yeah, I've still got a lot to learn.
Well, that's amazing.
So,
next time you see all of those riders you just mentioned, ask them how their Activo-Med rugs are going.
I will, absolutely.
Elle has just asked, clearly this is a popular topic, who is your absolute dressage idol and why?
Dressage idol. That's a hard question because, and now that I'm in this environment, there are so many people that have so many like little things that you can just take away. Like you might be watching Clip My Horse or one of the other big videoing like big competitions and stuff, and you just see little things that they do. I really don't have an idol. Like it could be Carl Hester if I really wanted, but then I've ridden for him, so that might be a little bit of idolization there. But these riders, like, to do what they do, you got to put in their hours, and I just really respect that. Like even Stefan and what he's achieved in his life and who he's ridden for and the horses he's ridden with. Like we didn't know this, but when he was riding His Highness for Klaus Buckenhall, so Dazzler's mother was actually bred by the people that bred His Highness. So we've got a connection there that we never even knew about. And you just go, these guys go through so much. Like, I don't have a, yep, it's that person. It's like everyone has their own little thing. And you've got to be open-minded with these. Sorry, it's lunchtime. Everyone's going a bit nuts. Yeah, you've got to take everything from everyone and create your own style and everything. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah. Well, that sounds wonderful. Look, thank you, Beth. We might let you get back to your post-work routine there and finish drying off. Thank you everyone for all your questions. Same as with Heidi, if you do have something burning that you want to ask Beck, you can
absolutely
email afterwards, and yeah, we'll be happy to get her information. So thank you, Beck.
Thanks, guys, and thank you so much, Heidi, for your spiel, because I really learned a lot as to why I love my Activo-Med. It's like a whole new level of understanding. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Beck.
Thanks, guys.
No worries. All right. Thank you, everyone. That is the conclusion of our webinar. As I mentioned at the beginning, I have emailed around some information and we'll send a bit of follow-up information in the next couple of days. We do have a few specials running together with Heidi at SpectraVET. You can organise an Activo-Med power pad and introductory level laser at a special price. So we're happy to have a chat to anyone who is keen to do that. And we also will have some specials on the general Activo-Med range. So the rug range, the accessories. I know we've got quite a lot of people here who've already got rugs. So if there's something that you're wanting to add on in the way of leg wraps, girths, etc., we're happy to help you. And then also the performance equipment range, so the spas, treadmills, etc. If we've got anyone who's setting up facilities, we're happy to look after you with a special price for supporting the webinar. So thank you all so very much. Hopefully I have done the technology right and we'll be able to save this and provide it to those who've attended. In case you want to refresh any of the information, I know particularly Heidi's information had some there. So yeah. All right. So thank you, everyone. Have a good night, and everyone stay warm. I know we've got lots of New Zealanders who will be absolutely freezing. I've seen a few comments about rugs and hot water bottles and horses in stables. So we wish everyone well with that. And thanks, Heidi. I can see you're there.
Yeah, no, that's no worries. Thanks, Carly. This has been great.
No problems. Okay, thank you, everyone, and we'll speak to you soon.